through. Some of these could be heavy, possibly thundery. There could even be a bit of snow over the Scottish mountains, which not unheard of for the start of June. Later on, as we go through the rest of this week, it's going to be a bit cloudier, a bit cooler than it has been recently, and most of us will see a bit of rain at times. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems up in North Ayrshire, north of Androssen. The A78 has been closed in both directions between the Montford roundabout and the Chapelton Road junction at Seamill, just south of West Kilbride, at the scene of a collision which continues to be investigated. 2 lanes are closed westbound on the M62 through West Yorkshire, just before the Ainley top turn-off. Junction 24, of course, north of Huddersfield, where a car's broken down in the 2 left lanes. The A1M is queuing heading north through Hertfordshire away from London, 6 to 7 from Welland up to the Stevenage south exit. The inside lane shut for emergency road repairs. In Ceredigion, the A44 Aberystwyth is closed for emergency repairs. And there are delays of 20 minutes on South Western Railway trains through London from Wimbledon along to London Waterloo, following an earlier 40 train. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there and happy Monday to you. There are 31 days to go until the election, and if you ask me, things have just got a whole load more interesting. Why? Well, 2 hours ago, Nigel Farage announced that he is now the leader of Reform UK and he will stand in the next election. Your thoughts on that? Also, as well, I want to talk about a Tory policy as well. Gender and biological sex. Is it time that we make clear the difference? Is it a culture war or common sense? You tell me. Touching hands, reaching out. Tell me something. Genuine question. Did that look like a load of football hooligans and far-right muppets to you? Or not? Why are the press so absolutely intent on diminishing and smearing and undermining normal people with what I would call pretty normal concerns. Your thoughts on that I refer, of course, to the protests that took place on the weekend here in London. Also, as well, an open letter has just been written by media lovies. They are demanding an end to UK arms sales to Israel. Meanwhile, in just another day in Britain, protesters have smashed the living daylights out of windows of multiple banks because, you guessed it, the war in Gaza. Your thoughts on it all? Well, we've got a lot to get stuck into tonight. But before we do, let's cross live for tonight's 6 o'clock news.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Well, as you've been hearing, Nigel Farage has said he will stand as the Reform UK parliamentary candidate for Clacton in Essex in the general election in July. Speaking at a news conference in London this afternoon to confirm his change of heart, Mr Farage also announced he'll take over as leader of the party.
So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier.
Nigel Farage. Well, in other news today, Rishi Sunak has denied he's stoking a culture war with his pledge to amend the Equality Act. The Prime Minister wants to make clear sex means biological sex rather than gender and says the current confusion over the legal definition can't be allowed to continue. The proposals would allow organisations to bar men who identify as women from single-sex spaces, including hospital wards and sports events. Labour has called the policy an election distraction. The Liberal Democrats have said there's no need to unpick the Gender Equality Act. Rishi Sunak, though, says the Conservatives are trying to clarify the law rather than change it.
So the Equalities Act was passed over a decade ago, and what's clear today is that there's a lack of clarity in the law, and that's risking the safety of women and girls. So we've announced the bold action that we would change the law, change the Equalities Act so that sex means biological sex. And what that will do will mean that providers of single-sex services and single-sex spaces will be able to protect women and girls and ensure their safety and security.
Rishi Sunak. Meanwhile, First Minister and SNP leader John Swinney says the Conservatives' plans to change the Equalities Act are a deliberate attempt to undermine the Scottish Parliament.
This is just another step in the Conservative attempts to erode the powers of the Scottish Parliament. It's been going on for some time. It started after Brexit with the Internal Market Act, and the Conservatives are just carrying on this whole process of undermining and eroding the powers of the Scottish Parliament. Now, obviously, I don't accept that. I don't believe that. I want the Scottish Parliament to be a parliament that can address all of the issues that affect the lives of people in Scotland. So what the Conservatives are doing today is part of a deliberate strategy to undermine the powers of the Scottish Parliament.
John Swinney. Sir Keir Starmer says Labour is totally committed to the security of the nation and, he said, to the UK's nuclear deterrent. He's described the Trident programme as a fundamental and vital part of our defence. Labour is pledging to build 4 new nuclear submarines and increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP when economic conditions, Sir Keir says, are right. The Conservatives say they'll meet that target by 2030. Sir Keir dismissed concerns that his shadow Foreign Secretary and the Deputy Party leader voted against the UK having nuclear weapons just 8 years ago, and he's criticised the Tories for politicising the issue.
Prefer if politics were kept out of this issue, even at this election. Throughout the whole of this Parliament, I have deliberately not been partisan over security. Yet just before this election, the Tories questioned this Labour Party's commitment to national security. And I will not let that stand. The people of Britain need to know that their leaders will keep them safe, and we will.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are vowing to tackle water pollution as part of their manifesto. They've announced plans for a new protected blue flag status for rivers, with legally binding targets to prevent sewage dumping and special protection for swimmers and wildlife. It's going to include, they say, the expansion of marine protected areas to cover at least 50% of the UK's territorial waters by 2030. Lib Dem Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper says the move will benefit everyone.
And we've been leading the campaign to end the scandal of raw sewage dumping. Here in Henley, local residents know all about that. They know that the sewage dumping is bad for wildlife. They know that it's causing real problems with tourism as well. And people want to see an end to this particular scandal. That's why today Liberal Democrats are announcing our plans to introduce a blue flag status to protect local rivers.
Daisy Cooper speaking to GB News in Henley-on-Thames. Now, friends and fans of the former rugby legend Rob Burrow have paid tribute to the unassuming lad with the superhero story following his death at the age of 41. Burrow's passing was confirmed by Leeds Rhinos on Sunday following a lengthy and high-profile battle with motor neuron disease. He raised awareness and millions of pounds for the charity, and well-wishers have gathered outside Headingley Stadium in Yorkshire today to pay their respects, laying flowers, scarves and other tributes to him. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I do want to start my programme just reflecting on that last story there. Like many of you, of course, we have been touched very much by Rob Burrow's story when it comes to MND. It's such a cruel, horrific disease, and my thoughts, of course, go out not just to Rob's family, but, of course, all families as well that suffer with this disease. I really do hope and pray that a cure is found any day now. My fingers absolutely are crossed, and I send my love to each and every one of you that are currently struggling with that horrendous disease. My name is Michelle Dewberry, and I am with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, and the former Labour MP, Luciana Berger. Good evening to you. Welcome back to you, Mark, as well. Also, you know the drill on this programme, don't you? It is not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? Graham, you were my first contact in saying, Michelle, please stop singing on your programme. Honestly, I've missed my opportunity. I think really I should have been some kind of pop star or something. Clearly I'm not, so I do like to have a little outlet every now and again. But whatever's on your mind tonight, you are very welcome. gbnews.com/yoursay is how you can communicate to me and each other on the website. Of course, you can email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet or X me. Lots of you getting in touch tonight. We have a lot to discuss. I also want to say as well, regular viewers of this programme will remember that we covered a horrific story a few weeks back now. Don't worry, I'm not going to replay it. It was awful then, and it's just as awful now. I'm talking about the organised dogfighting. Do you remember that one? Horrendous. Well, we've got news today of some convictions secured on that subject. Multiple people have been sentenced to prison. Good is what I say. Absolute scumbags. I've got to say, though, the largest sentence was for 4 years. The second sentence was for 2 years and 6 months. And guess what? These guys got banned from owning dogs for 10 years. I mean, I aren't being funny or anything, but what do you think is going to happen after a decade? Do you think that these people who seemingly think it's OK to torture animals suddenly have a personality transplant, change their ways after 10 years? I think not. What says you? But you know what? Look, at least some of these people are behind bars. Good is what I say, and I know that many of you were affected by that story too. There you go. We've got it off to a positive start, haven't we? Of course, I want to look tonight at one of the big stories in town after weeks, months actually, of Willie or weren't he? We know that the answer to that is now yes. I'm talking of Nigel Farage. He has announced that now he's the new leader of Reform UK, but there's more. He's also going to stand for election. Look. Let me cross live to Christopher Herp, our political editor. Good evening to you, Christopher. Anyone that's just tuned in and doesn't know what on earth's going on, bring them up to speed.
Well, Michelle, good evening. Great to be on your show again. Well, you join me here in central London, where we've seen some political news made here in big style here, with Nigel Farage saying he will stand to be an MP. He's going to fight the seat of Clacton, a seat held by Douglas Carswell for UKIP back at the 2015 general election. In fact, the only seat won by a UKIP MP when he was leader, of course, Nigel Farage back in the day. He announced that. He announced that Richard Tice is standing aside. He'll become chairman. Farage is now the leader, and the leader, he says, for 5 years. He says that the Reform UK party can be the biggest party in Parliament by 2029. He says the election is over, Michelle. He says it's happened, it's gone, been and gone. Labour has won a massive supermajority. He's talking there about the Sky News MRP poll. This is a poll of 60,000 people between the end of May and early June. They are finding that Labour have 422 MPs after the election, against the Tories 140, Lib Dems 48, and Reform a big fat 0. That's a majority of 194. That's more than the Blair majority that we saw back in 1997. So clearly, and that supports an MRP poll that GB News was able to report on and announced on Friday night. That gave the Labour Party a much bigger majority, but even so, we are looking at a triple-digit majority for Labour, according to two big MRP polls taking place in the past about 5 days been announced. Elsewhere, earlier we heard from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. He's been up in Henley campaigning on the issue of a culture wars issue of what is a woman. He's making very clear that he believes that his party and his government will try and change the Equality Act to ensure that a woman is someone who is female at birth, and that remains with them, and that means that they can ban people from shared spaces in prison cells, in prisons, and elsewhere. So it's an issue of culture wars they're trying to fight there. And with the Labour Party, they've been in the north of England supporting defence. They've got a triple lock on defence. They're saying that the Labour government, if they win power, will maintain the nuclear weapons, will build 4 new nuclear submarines in Barrow, and will upgrade nuclear submarines when required. They're trying to distance themselves from the Jeremy Corbyn time, and of course that Labour leader couldn't even say he could fire a nuclear weapon in defence of our security in this country. And then finally, the Liberal Democrats, they've been also in Henley highlighting river pollution. And in fact, at one point today, Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Lib Democrats, floated past on a boat waving as Rishi Sunak spoke with rowers and ate donuts. And of course, the Lib Dems see that as a moment to kind of rain on the parade of the Prime Minister. They enjoy that quite a lot.
Interesting. So look at that. Look at it. I mean, if you're listening on the radio and you can't see what is going on, you've just got a scene. I mean, it's almost like a bit of a comedy sketch now. You've just got people on, I mean, we talk about small boat crossings, don't we? And this is one that perhaps Rishi Sunak would be desperately keen to stop, because you've got a smiling bunch of people there, photo bombing with the Lib Dem signs behind them. But I tell you, Rishi Sunak's not stopped any small boats anytime soon, so he won't be stopping that one either. But for now, Christopher Hope, thank you very much for that update. I'm joined now by the Political Research Director at Savanta UK, Chris Hopkins. Good evening to you. We've just been hearing there about some of the potential impact of Nigel Farage returning to Reform UK. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this has the potential to be massive, Michelle, frankly. You know, I think that Nigel Farage is the closest that British politics really gets to celebrity, and that's irrespective of the fact that he went in the jungle. You know, he is a name brand. Yes, he is a bit divisive, but frankly, the types of voters that Nigel Farage and Reform UK are going after aren't the sort that already dislike him. They are those that are kind of on the fence or maybe wavering from the Conservative Party. We've seen in the last year and a half under Rishi Sunak's premiership that a lot of voters from the Conservatives in 2019 have gone to Reform UK, and there is real potential now that Nigel Farage is sort of back on the scene, and yeah, it's going to be very prominent in this general election campaign. That bleeding from the Conservative Party to Reform UK has not necessarily stopped.
And tell me about this whole notion of none of the above, the amount of people that are just, quite frankly, either going to spoil a ballot or not even bother to vote at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably slightly overplayed. I think there is a lot of apathy in UK politics in general, but I don't think that necessarily is going to translate into lower or hugely lower turnout at this election. I think we're going to get, a reasonable sized turnout similar to previous, and yeah, I don't really think it's going to have a huge impact. But those Reform voters that were maybe not going to vote, I think Nigel Farage returning is them way more chance of turning out than they've ever had before.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Chris Hopkins. He is a political research director at Savanta, UK. I'll bring my panel in a second about Nigel Farage returning. I can tell you guys have been in touch with me. Andy says Farage seems to think he's some kind of right-wing messiah, but he's not. He's just a very haughty boy. The ego has landed in Clacton. He says, and yes, I did mean to write haughty and not naughty, as in arrogantly superior and disdainful. Ouch, get off that fence. Connor says Farage was a banker, man of the people, indeed. Susan, though, says, brilliant news. Go, Nigel. You've made many people very happy. Lee says, I would sooner vote for Farage than voting for any of the other two main parties. What do you make to it, Mark?
Well, at last, something interesting happens in the general election campaign, so let's be grateful for that, I think. It's not been the most exciting first week or two. I wonder if much has changed. I mean, prior to this announcement today, Nigel Farage was all over the airwaves campaigning for Reform UK. He was on Question Time last week on the BBC as the Reform spokesman. He's now got a slightly different title. He'll be called Leader rather than Honorary President, and he is contesting a seat. And I guess in that seat, that improves Reform UK's chances. But I don't think this changes an enormous amount overall. Farage seems to think that somehow his re-emergence as the official leader means suddenly Reform will take light, it will catch fire, zoom past the Conservatives. But Chris Hope earlier was referencing that poll from your rival broadcaster at Sky. OK, that was before the announcement, but still predicts Reform will win 0 seats. Maybe they'll win 1. Maybe a couple. I reckon if you offered Farage 3 or 4 now, he'd rip your arm off for it.
Oh, well, you are downplaying the Farage effect on Reform UK. What do you make to it at home? Luciana, what do you think?
Well, the outcome of this election is going to go one of 2 ways. There's only 2 results that we're going to have. We're either going to have Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, or if we look at every single poll that's come out today, and I'm not one in any way, shape or form to be complacent, but all the polls indicate today we're on course to see Keir Starmer under a changed Labour Party as the leader of this country. So in terms of what's happening with Nigel Farage today, it's very much in my mind a sideshow. And the fact that he's announced that he's the leader, that he's going to be in post for 5 years. I mean, that wouldn't be allowed in the other main political parties. It doesn't seem very democratic.
What wouldn't be allowed?
To say that you're going to be in post for 5 years. He's announced that he's going to be in post as leader for at least 5 years. Well, that's not how it works, certainly in the other main political parties. There's opportunities for members to have a vote and decide who they want as leader of the party. He's just announced himself not only as leader, but also as a candidate. There's 599 other seats that will be contested at this election. So, yes, this might be interesting in terms of what might happen at Clacton. But for the rest of the country, it's going to be a very different focus.
And Nigel Farage basically said he thinks that, I'm not doing a direct quote, but I was listening as he was saying it, that essentially there's not much of a contest and that Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister. Do you agree with that sentiment? That it's pretty much just a done deal?
Well, again, I don't take anything for granted, and I don't think any party...
Are you just being modest? Like, secretly, do you think, yeah, we've done it?
I sincerely hope that we see what this country desperately needs, which is change, and Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister of our country. But the election is still a number of weeks away. Politics is not a science, and anything can happen. But certainly, if you look at all the polls, it's only widening in terms of the expected outcome that Labour is very likely to win if we look at everything that's come out today.
I've got to just mention as well, because, of course, we are in an election period, so there are indeed other candidates that will be contesting that seat in Clacton, and they are as follows. Jovan Oswald-Nepal from the Labour Party, Giles Watling from the Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem from the Lib Dems, Nigel Farage from Reform UK, and Natasha Osborne from the Green Party. All candidates there have been contacted and invited onto GB News. Someone else, I'll just tell, was responding to the Nigel Farage situation, and that was Norman Baker. Let's have a look what he had to say.
question, Martin, I think, is what impact this has beyond Clacton. I think it will push up the reform vote in the election, largely at the expense of the Conservatives. So although I think Reform are unlikely to win more than one seat, i.e. Nigel's seat, I think the impact could be to damage the Conservatives quite significantly and give more oomph, if you like, to Labour and the Lib Dems.
There you go. There's a cross-selection of views there. I shall leave it with you to have the final say at home. Get in touch with me, all the usual ways to let me know what you make to it all after the break. I want to pick up on something important that happened at the weekend. A massive protest took place. It was the far right and the football hooligans who've done it. I'll see you in 2.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Washington Post estimates that $50 billion was pledged by giant corporate donors over the last few years. Mega funders like George Soros, who dropped $220 million into fancy non-profits, and a lot of ordinary people sent in small donations. So where did all this money go? I mean, small organisations were raising insane amounts of money just through QR codes, sticking them up on posters and on the internet, on social media, and getting huge amounts of money. Where did it go? Well, we can see that quite a lot of it got spent on fun stuff for the organisers. So, I mean, Patrice Cullors, the founder of Black Lives Matter, was we know that she bought, or Black Lives Matter on her behalf bought this luxury villa that she's like, oh, we're going to use it for community workshops or whatever. Yeah, that, and living in, and also her brother's business got paid, nearly $1 million.
Security.
And her baby daddy got paid nearly $1 million to provide creative consultancy services.
I'm thinking about, as you said really at the top here, finally journalists are looking into this, and it's ridiculous that this amount of money hasn't really been explored, because when they did say, hey, what have you done with this money, of course what she said was basically, you're being massively racist, how dare you?
You're racist, look over there.
Yeah, essentially. And then some people were, oh, okay, yeah, sorry, we didn't mean to question you. So the figures that have been raised are astounding. And yeah, as some of the stuff is just mental, like, and multi-million-pound homes, dollar homes.
But it's good, so the money got spent on having fun instead of, like, it would have just been like annoying community projects to create more racism.
Yeah. What they're really not ready for, the media,
lives.
they're still calling it the killing of George Floyd. Many people think he died of an OD. That's the next level they're not ready for.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello everybody, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co with you till 7 o'clock tonight. I've got lots that I want to talk about with you this evening. Alongside me, my panel remains the Director of the Popular Conservatives, Mike Littlewood, and the former Labour MP, Luciana Berger. Good evening back to both of you. Terry says, Michelle, anyone who actively makes their way to a ballot box and spoils their ballot when they're at last, they're given the chance to make their change. If they tick the usual ones, he says, they deserve to have their head examined. There you go. Keep your thoughts coming in. Are you going to turn out and vote at this next election? If not, please tell me why not. Now, there was something that really caught my eye over the weekend, so it did. There was some protests that took place. It was led by a man that many of you will be familiar with, Tommy Robinson. It took place in London on Saturday. I can't help but notice what this was actually described as by many of the media. Let's just take a look. was going to sing the next few lines because I actually love that song, but Graham's got in touch and told me to pack it in singing. Apparently I'm hurting his ears. You're a harsh man, Graham. Anyway, look, did you see the way the media reported this protest? Take a look at this. Headline. Football hooligans being in town. This was all about the far right. But, I mean, I'm showing you now the protest, and in a second I'll show you these headlines. But, look, to me, these are just normal people. They are really raising concerns. Let me get you these headlines so you can just look at this. Here we go. Look, Tommy Robinson supporters attend hate march. Tommy Robinson leads hundreds of football hooligans in march. Far right this and far right that. A couple of things catch my eye there. Well, first of all, if that was hundreds of people, well, I don't know, someone needs to go back to school and learn to count, quite frankly. And this obsession with calling people, smearing people far right and other things like football hooligans and this and that. What's going on?
Well, listen, Michelle, that Sweet Caroline clip looked like an awful lot of football games I've been to, actually. I mean, England fans sing that, waving Union Jacks and St George crosses. I rather agree with the inference of your question, that it's too sloppy to use a pejorative descriptor, whether it's far-right, fascist, Nazi or something similar, to describe a particular group of people. I think Tommy Robinson you could explain as being on the far right, but the suggestion that everybody on this process...
disagree with that.
Maybe they disagree with that. I mean, he's certainly on, I don't know, the nationalistic right, but I wish we'd find better descriptors. Right and left are terms from the French National Assembly from 250 years ago. They're not very good ways of actually summing up politics. I don't know how often we describe, I don't know, Jeremy Corbyn as far left in the mainstream media.
And by the way, one of the objectives of this protest was to screen a film, basically, and it was all about what people would regard as two-tier policing. It was all about potentially the concerns that people would have about totalitarian states, the control that many people seem to want to have over us when it came to things like lockdown and so on and so forth. I have to say, I confess, I do not regard any of these concerns as far right. Where are you on this?
So I spent some time this afternoon looking very closely at what took place on Saturday. First, in terms of how it was described, how it was promoted in advance, how it was promoted, who it was promoted to, and some of the things that took place during that march. And it wasn't a few hundred, as you say, but it certainly wasn't anything more than a few thousand in terms of the numbers of the people that took place. And yes, you had a video of people singing and it sounded very happy-clappy, but I've also seen some of the banners of what people put up on that march, and I also saw and heard...
Like what?
Well, they're not for repeating. In my mind, they...
There can't be anything so bad that we can't even repeat
it. I've got it written down here. I can assure you that it would break Ofcom rules for me to repeat some of the chants that were said. And I'm very happy to say them to you in the advert, but I'm certainly not going to repeat them on air in terms of what people were chanting, which in my mind is not acceptable. You know, this is not...
Was it a minority of people doing what you're suggesting, or was it en masse? Because I saw a lot of this too, and I really didn't see en masse people doing anything wrong.
Well, again, I reflected on what happened. When I've looked at many different demonstrations, first and foremost, I respect the right of anyone to protest. That's a democratic right in this country, and we should respect that and protect that. However, in terms of the message boards and the ways in which this was promoted and who it was promoted to, again, I was looking at the people that spoke. So we had a speech from Roger Firth, who was from the English Defence League. In my mind, that certainly is a far-right party. I would describe Tommy Robinson as the far-right, and we often hear about groups to the left of Labour being described as hard left or far left. So that is a distinction that I understand, and I think it epitomises certainly elements of what I saw.
So what do you class as far-right, then?
Anything to the right of the Conservatives.
So anything. So if someone wants to stop the small boats, because let's face it, the Tories might pretend that they do, but they clearly don't. If someone wants to control,
I think all parties are.
So hold on. So if someone wants to control immigration, because the Tories, whilst you might say on paper you do, no, you don't. That's why we've got record net migration. So anyone that believes in controlling your borders, stopping small boats, that's far right to you.
But that's one of Labour's pledges, to control migration. That's what we've heard about all over.
No, I'm asking you what you regard as far right, and you've just said anyone to the right of a standard Tory policy.
No, in terms of how, I mean, Tommy Robinson, in my mind, is far right, and the
I know, but that's why I'm asking you, what do you regard as far right? So, like, for example, you've just said anyone that's to the right of a Tory policy. So I am to the right of a Tory policy, because whatever you might...
So are Tyson Farage.
Yeah. So would you class Nigel Farage as far right?
I think there's elements within that group of people that are far right, yeah.
Well, Farage is definitely to the right of the Conservatives, as is Tice. But I don't think it would be fair to describe them as far right.
I think it would be absolutely
they take a mainstream position. You may disagree with it, but they're mainstream politicians.
We can disagree with the semantics. I think certainly what we saw on the streets of London was not about community cohesion and bringing people together.
That's certainly true.
It's about division. And in my mind, that epitomises...
Hang on, what was
the
about division?
Again, some of the banners that were shown, some of the things that were said on, and if you're allowed to show the speeches, then please do so your listeners can can appraise for themselves.
I spent quite a lot of time because I knew I was going to discuss this topic. So not only did I watch some of the goings on at the protests, and by the way, I just do want to say there was certainly a couple of banners there that I didn't agree with, and I also saw children effing and jeffing in the streets. I really don't approve of that either, actually. Sorry to be uptight about it, but I think it's quite poor parenting if you're taking your kids on the streets and you're encouraging them to be swearing. That's really not cool in my mind. Yeah. So I agree with you that there were things there that I certainly wouldn't condone, but this is what I found interesting. The majority of the people there were peaceful, what I would just call normal people who are absolutely sick to the back teeth of the direction of travel that this country has. They feel completely unrepresented by any mainstream politician. Many of them, perhaps I would say, probably won't even turn out and vote. And this lunacy and this obsession with calling people far right. By the way, I don't know if you saw what happened in Germany, by the way, everybody. I can show you a tweet, I think, from Sky News in a second about this one, because you had someone there who had been protesting, raising concerns about what he would regard as the Islamification of Europe. Whilst he was protesting about that, someone who you could reasonably assume to be an Islamist came along and stabbed a number of people, including a police officer who then died. What do people like Sky News do, everybody? They talk about a police officer being stabbed during an attack at a far-right rally. So they're desperately keen to label one side as far-right. They pay no attention whatsoever to the, what seems like, Islamist fanatic who came along and stabbed multiple people live on air. A man who we now know, by the way, was an Afghan migrant into Germany. Why is that not featured? Why does that not matter in that news headline and those kind of stories?
Well, I think what happened in Germany is absolutely abhorrent, and I hope that person is held to account and faces the full force of the law that I know that they will pursue in Germany. That act in of itself, which is absolutely horrific, doesn't detract from the march itself, which did have elements of the far right in it. The two can be correct. There's not one or the other.
I guess the argument here is what constitutes far right. Because if you're someone who is sick to the back teeth of your children having agendas forced down them when they go to school, i.e. being over-sexualised, if you're someone who does not consent to this uncontrolled immigration and the way it is changing local communities, that indeed is not far right. If you're someone who does not buy into the fact that the climate is literally about to spontaneously combust by the end of this programme, that is not far right. And nobody is standing up for those people when people do.
You're right. I think you're right.
They get called far right, and it's pathetic.
There was lots of different people that attended that demonstration. You're right. There were people that were talking about conspiracy theories around coronavirus, for example. There were people with lots of different causes that came together. But again, I come back to my point about how this march or this demonstration was promoted, and the different sites and message boards and WhatsApp groups in which the details of it were promoted and sent out. And those
what does that mean?
Groups.
What does that mean? So now you've got an issue with where someone advertised the march.
I'm saying in terms of the types of people that were proactively invited to attend. I'm not saying everyone is of that group, and certainly, as we know, there was lots of different issues.
Yeah, but hang on, Luciana. I mean, things like Stop the War demos. Socialist Workers' Party will be heavily involved in that. You'll almost see on any demo, even moderately to the left, huge banners from the Socialist Workers' Party. But we wouldn't call a demo like that or a demo about public sector pay far left. just because it had been promoted within the Socialist Workers' Party network, would we? Even though they're far to the left of the Labour Party. Michelle, I think on this, I don't like the labelling. I think we should report it in a vanilla way. I'm worried, I mean, Luciana may have done you a favour vis-à-vis Ofcom, but I'm worried we can't repeat what was said. I think on national television we should look into that. I found one chant which is definitely offensive, I think you might say. But I'm not really worried about people being offended. And too often, I think we take the view that if you're offended, we can't repeat it. Obviously, if there's incitement to violence or support for a terrorist group or some such like, you've crossed a line. But I think we need to be much more relaxed about people saying things left or right, which might even be a bit wacky, might be a bit offensive.
I think it's worth kind of sharing kind of like where my perspective comes from, because I've had personal experience of people who are very clearly on the far right, including from groups that are now proscribed in this country. So groups like National Action, an organisation that's been banned by the UK government. I have seen 4 people convicted of the death threats and anti-Semitism, the anti-Jewish hatred that they have directed towards me, that come from organisations that themselves say are from the far right, that are included and invited to these marches, not just from National Action. People who...
But anyone was invited. It's an open invite for anyone who is concerned about some of the issues that we've been discussing. It was an open invitation to anyone. When you get any group of large people, any large group of people together, you will always get unsavoury characters.
But who did you have at the front? Who was at the front? Who was at the front of the march?
The organisers of the march.
Tommy Robinson. I mean, in my mind, he's very clearly on the far right.
You will say he's on the far right. I can tell you now that many people will disagree. Many people will say that what he is somebody who has the balls to speak out and raise concerns about what many people are experiencing. I've just given you that example of Sky News. Someone who you could very easily assume is an Islamist fanatic comes along and kills a police officer. All the media want to do is call the rally far right. It is a disgrace, ladies and gents. And by the way, I'm going to show you in a second.
There was Nazi chants at that.
In a second, I'm going to show you how these far-right and hooligans left the space. I've got a tweet, actually, just to show you the condition that they left Parliament Square in. But your final points.
I was just going to make the point that in Germany, again, the two things can be true. There were Nazi chants that were made on that march.
Nazi chants. I mean, what is a Nazi chant these days? I mean, because there was a counter-protest to this one, by the way. Counter-protest saying things like Nazi scum off our streets. First and foremost, someone disagreeing with you doesn't make you a Nazi. And secondly, who are you to determine who can and who cannot be on the public streets of Britain? That, to me, sounds a little bit like fascism. And I thought those people actually rejected that. Your thoughts? I'll see you in 2.
Hello again. Very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst it is going to stay dry for many of us as we go through the rest of today, we can expect some wet weather pushing its way in as we go into tomorrow. That's in association with a feature currently out in the Atlantic, and it's heading its way towards the UK. For the time being, though, we are going to have a lot of dry weather as we go through the rest of this evening and overnight. Some places will see some clear skies developing, but many areas sticking with largely cloudy skies. And then rain pushing its way in initially across parts of Northern Ireland, but reaching far western parts of Scotland, England and Wales later on. Because of the largely cloudy skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, but some places under the clear skies could just about drop into single figures. If we take a closer look at what will be happening first thing tomorrow morning, and it's a generally fine picture across many southern southeastern parts. Yes, a bit of cloud across East Anglia, but on the whole a dry story here. Different picture further north and west though. Rain across Northern Ireland, northwest England, parts of Wales, and also a large chunk of Scotland as well, waking up to a pretty wet start as that wet weather pushes its way in. Eastern Scotland may be clinging on to some fine weather for a little bit longer, but across far northern parts of Scotland, here there will be some hefty showers around, and some of these could turn pretty heavy, possibly even thundery as we go through the day. The rain is gradually going to make its way southeastwards, but southeastern parts of the country likely to stay pretty dry by the time the system arrives here. It will have broken up so much that I'm only expecting 1 or 2 spots of rain, if anything. And in the southeast, temperatures still on the warm side, highs of around 22-23 Celsius, but something markedly fresher towards the northwest behind the front. As we look into Wednesday, it is going to be a showery day, particularly towards the north and west. That's where the showers are coming from. Some of them could be heavy, possibly even thundery, maybe even a little bit of snow over the highest ground of Scotland. But further south, it's looking dry and brighter. A similar picture on Thursday, but I think by Friday, the showers are going to be a bit more widespread. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel. Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratton, and major problems up in North Ayrshire do continue for the A78, which remains closed in both directions just north of Ardross, and a serious accident off the Montfode roundabout continues to be investigated. Meanwhile, the M62 is crawling westbound. 2 lanes are still out of action just before the Ainley top exit, junction 24, where a car's broken down, causing queues back to Chain Bar, the M606, as you head away from Bradford. It's taking about 40 minutes to get through. Heading north up the A1M through Hertfordshire, that's down to a single lane about a mile north of the Welling turn off junction 6. Emergency road repair works are underway, and the Kent stretch of the M25 is currently blocked clockwise. Need to 1B at Dartford, where a lorry is broken down, causing queues back over the QE2 bridge into Essex. And delays of 40 minutes and some cancellations on trains out of Victoria to Clapham Junction through London. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello everybody, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Till 7 o'clock, Director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, remains alongside me, as does the former Labour MP, Luciana Berger. Before the break, I was just showing to you the condition of the Parliament Square after the far right and the football hooligans have left it. Look at that. It's spotless, everybody. Luciana just asked me in the break, well, how do you know that someone didn't come along and tidy up afterwards? Because it was still ongoing. People respected their place. And by the way, there was barely, I think there was only something like 2...
There's also stewards there.
Yeah, but they're not litter picker-uppers, are they?
Well, they normally are when they're around Parliament Square.
See, I think that you're just desperate to
I'm just saying, I'm not saying either way, but we don't know for sure.
I know, but why? You see, I would just look at that.
On the face of the evidence, Michelle, they're tidy.
Okay, we can say that about really interesting. There's a nice, tidy area that's been left nice and tidy. And instead of people going, well, actually, these people were respectful, it's, how do you know someone didn't come and tidy up? How do you know that someone's not... Why can't we just accept that, actually, these people didn't behave badly?
I'm not bothered either way. I'm just saying, we just don't know for sure.
And by the way, you should have seen the amount of arrests that happened at the counter-protest. It was those guys that ended up causing the disruption. I could tell you that for free. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. There's been a Tory policy announced today, every day it seems these days. Anyway, let's play.
So the Equalities Act was passed over a decade ago, and what's clear today is that there's a lack of clarity in the law, and that's risking the safety of women and girls. So we've announced the bold action that we would change the law, change the Equalities Act so that sex means biological sex, and what that will do will mean that providers of single-sex services and single-sex spaces will be able to protect women and girls and ensure their safety and security.
Oh, I feel so strongly about this one, but I'm going to shut up and let Mark speak. Your thoughts?
Common sense, isn't it? I mean, I find it remarkable that politicians even need to be saying this, or it's a policy announcement by Rishi Sunak, who I completely agree with, but whatever next? A leading politician saying that we agree with the law of gravity, for example. I mean, clearly sex is biological, at least as it pertains to these sort of things, such as, changing rooms and communal lavatories and the right. I do wish that Rishi and the government had actually taken the action to put this in place prior to the election. We have been, the Conservatives have been in office for some 14 years, could have done something about it, but bang on the money. Absolutely ridiculous that some bloke who purports to identify as a woman can access women's changing rooms, women's bathrooms and the rest of it. So full marks to Rishi Sunak, but a bit sad that we're even having to have this discussion.
Luciana?
Well, I agree with Mark that it's sad that we're having to have this conversation, and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said it himself when he said, we've had the Equality Act for over 10 years. If there is any confusion, which actually there are protections within the Equality Act for single-sex spaces, but if there is anything that needed clarifying, they've had 14 years to do it. So, I mean, I totally accept the premise. I do think we should be having this debate and having these discussions, thinking more about kind of like the kind of concepts of dignity and respect, which are kind of absent from the conversation today. But separate to that, I totally accept the...
What do you mean, dignity and respect? What's disrespectful about saying that biological sex is real?
I support the notion of having ensuring spaces for biological women.
But do you think it's disrespectful to say that a biological man cannot become a biological woman?
Sorry, say that again.
Do you think it's disrespectful to say a biological man cannot become a biological woman?
Well, people go through gender reassignment.
That's not what I asked. I said, do you think it's disrespectful to say a biological man cannot become a biological woman?
No.
Good. What do you think to it at home? Because I think it's absolutely absurd. The very fact that we're having conversations about biological sex.
And it is absurd. It is absurd because, you know...
But does the Labour Party think anything needs to be clarified? I mean, you might criticise the Conservatives for not having done it. Does the Labour Party think that much clearer clarification that non-biological women cannot access these places should be absolutely clear, black and white? No discussion
Labour
about it.
has been very clear to say that we should have common sense guidance on this issue and that we should protect.
Because schools have really struggled with this, I think, because the guidance has been unclear.
And why haven't the government? You know, what they've done is really promote this kind of war, this culture war discussion, rather than actually do something about it. If the guidance isn't clear, then issue clear guidance. They've had 14 years to do so. And on the same day the Tories are talking about this and talking about toilets, we've got a Labour.
Where I disagree with you, Luciana, is I don't think this isn't confected, though, is it? Everybody says they're whipping up a culture war. We had this issue in Scotland with biological men going into women's prisons. It's a real thing.
And that's why we learn from the Scottish experience, and that's why we issue guidance which is common sense, and why we...
the law, really, not just guidance.
Well, if there was anything that needed clarifying, then we've had 14 years under this Conservative government to do it. What they've done is talk about it.
So let's hope Labour and Tory are on the same page.
Another article today from Kemi Badenoch talking about it. But where's the... You know, if there was something that needed clarifying, why haven't they done so already?
Let's hope both parties agree.
Well, there you go. I can tell you now very quickly that the Shadow Defence Secretary, John Healin, he said, we will not want to amend the Act. It's not needed. The Act, incidentally, was a Labour Act in 2010 that was opposed by the Tories, but it already provides protections for single-sex spaces for biological women. The government has had 14 years to do this, and long story short, it hasn't, and they think it's a distraction from the election campaign and the issues that other people basically want to focus on. I'm quite frankly furious with everybody on this. I don't even understand how we've got to the point where people will look at you seriously and tell you that a man can become a woman, and that when you see someone who is clearly a man, you have to pretend that they are a woman or else. I'm livid about it. Let's breathe. After the break, do you think we should ban arms sales to Israel? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know what, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him to go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And,
so,
you know,
Gareth,
speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
you know what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham. This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now, more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. My panel remains. Helen's just been in touch on the website saying, Michelle, stop talking about the far right and the football hooligans. I hope you are making tongue-in-cheek comments. It was peaceful people of all different faiths and colours and a rubbish-free site when we... Yes, Helen, keep up. I was, of course, talking tongue-in-cheek. Look, Sir Keir Starmer, he is facing fresh pressure to ban UK arms sales to Israel. Another open letter has been written. Let's cut to the chase. Luciana, what do you think?
Well, I think the focus in terms of what should, the role that the UK should be playing at the moment is to be doing everything possible to end the war, free the hostages, alleviate the humanitarian crisis, and do everything to actually achieve a real long-term political solution. I note that the letter, doesn't have that focus. Obviously, Keir Starmer is not the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak is the Prime Minister, but certainly what the government can and should be doing and what they've been asked to do is to publish the advice that they've had, both the legal advice and the policy advice, or even a summary of that, and we haven't yet had that. I can draw from my experience when I was in Parliament and I sat for a short period on the Committee on Arms Export Control. We have a very very rigid process in this country where every application for every arms export goes through a process that's led by the business department. It's very robust. And certainly, it's a law that we've had since 2002 and 2008. So that process has gone through. But certainly, if there's any concerns, then the government should bring forward their advice.
I'm not so sure about this. I can remember way back in the day there was a pressure, of course, on the Labour government to publish the legal advice about whether it was legal to go to war in Iraq. I think it's a bit difficult if governments have to keep publishing the legal advice they've received, because oftentimes these are political decisions made on the basis of legal advice. The legal advice is supposed to advise politicians, not to be the last word. Look, Michelle, I think it's incredibly complicated, and I don't mean to besmirch the intentions of the celebrities who've signed this letter. I'm not an expert on the arms industry by any manner or means, but I'm not really sure that the 100 people who've signed this letter are experts either. I do think Israel has not only the right to defend itself, the right to basically take out Hamas. We responded in the West very similarly to Al-Qaeda back in the day. We decided that we actually had to take out Al-Qaeda. You try and minimise civilian casualties while you're doing it, but and that should be a big focus of short-term action as well. How can we make sure civilians in the area are protected, moved, preferably? But I don't think unilateral decision by the United Kingdom would achieve anything, actually. I mean, supposing we passed arms or even, machinery that could be used for arms to the United States that are then used in arms that are sent to Israel. There needs to be, I think, a united Western front on this issue. Probably don't disagree too much with Luciana about what the long-term objective should be around political stability. In the short term, we need to minimise civilian casualties, but allow Israel to defend itself properly.
Did you also see the scenes in Manchester today as well? There was multiple banks. They had all their windows smashed in. They were absolutely daubed with red paint. I mean, really? Really? I mean, I get it. There's huge passions and very different opinions on this topic. But, I mean, come on now. Don't give your carte blanche to go around smashing up places that you don't like.
That's vandalism.
Yeah, spot on, see? Luciana says it's vandalism. I can tell you now that many people have very divided opinions tonight. Me personally, though, I'm off for a lie down. Thank you very much to my panel this evening. Thank you for your company. But up next is Vert 2024 with Camilla Tomonique. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Whilst it is going to stay dry for many of us as we go through the rest of today, we can expect some wet weather pushing its way in as we go into tomorrow. That's in association with a feature currently out in the Atlantic, and it's heading its way towards the UK. For the time being, though, we are going to have a lot of dry weather as we go through the rest of this evening and overnight. Some places will see some clear skies developing, but many areas sticking with largely cloudy skies. And then rain pushing its way in initially across parts of Northern Ireland, but reaching far western parts of Scotland, England and Wales later on. Because of the largely cloudy skies, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, but some places under the clear skies could just about drop into single figures. If we take a closer look at what will be happening first thing tomorrow morning, and it's a generally fine picture across many southern southeastern parts. Yes, a bit of cloud across East Anglia, but on the whole a dry story here. Different picture further north and west though. Rain across Northern Ireland, northwest England, parts of Wales, and also a large chunk of Scotland as well, waking up to a pretty wet start as that wet weather pushes its way in. Eastern Scotland may be clinging on to some fine weather for a little bit longer, but across far northern parts of Scotland, here there will be some hefty showers around, and some of these could turn pretty heavy, possibly even thundery as we go through the day. The rain is gradually going to make its way southeastwards, but southeastern parts of the country likely to stay pretty dry by the time the system arrives here. It will have broken up so much that I'm only expecting 1 or 2 spots of rain, if anything. And in the southeast, temperatures still on the warm side, highs of around 22-23 Celsius, but something markedly fresher towards the northwest behind the front. As we look into Wednesday, it is going to be a showery day, particularly towards the north and west. That's where the showers are coming from. Some of them could be heavy, possibly even thundery, maybe even a little bit of snow over the highest ground of Scotland. But further south, it's looking dry and brighter. A similar picture on Thursday, but I think by Friday, the showers are going to be a bit more widespread. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. The M62 is down to 2 lanes on that 4-lane stretch of the motorway, heading west through West Yorkshire. Just before the Ainley top exit, junction 24, a lorry's broken down, blocking off the 2 left lanes. It's taking about 40 minutes in the queues all the way back to the M606, the chain bar roundabout south of Bradford, of course. And at Leicestershire, northwest of Lutterworth, the A5 remains shut between Magna Park and Whiptoft, where a car overturned. If you're heading into London, the A13 is closed just after